Hello and welcome to Quit Your Crappy Job, Finding Courage for Positive Change.
Hello and welcome to this season finale of Quit Your Crappy Job podcast. I'm Jeff Hughes.
And I'm Scott Wilson. How are you doing this morning, Jeff?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Scott?
Great. And it seems like forever ago, Jeff, when we started this. We kind of kicked this thing around for a few months and then finally got serious about doing this, I think probably February or so of 2022.
Right.
And then when I was going through and looking at all the guests we had, it does seem like forever. It's only been a few months, I guess. Well, it's been about 6 months, and it seems like forever since we had our first
time
guest.
has gone by quick, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I think we actually crescendoed quite well, ending with probably the highest risk or highest stakes resignation, with Jack Barsky being the final episode. That was quite perhaps a crescendo. I don't know how we'll top that going forward, but still, we'll see where this takes us. Nonetheless.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's been so interesting to talk to different people and see what their situation has been and where they've gone, and I'm just surprised at the variety of people that we've ended up talking to over the past 6 months. And we've got some other ones lined up in the future that'll be, I'm sure, just as interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. When I look back and we think about this, as I've kind of done a little bit of preparation thinking about this, Jeff, is I really, there are some things that stand out to me, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think that stands out to me a bit is, and maybe I'll just lead with this, is this concept about life speaking to you, or if you want to say the universe speaking to you, the world, whatever. And I say that because, in fact, it's on the heels of some news I just got. My nephew just looks like he tore up his knee in a football game last night.
Wow.
And of course, this will be a long recovery. I've torn a tendon myself, and it's 12 to 15 months just because of blood flow to those are not like muscles or other things, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But it got me thinking about life setbacks a bit, and I've realized life really does have a way, Jeff, of kind of pushing you where I think you're destined to be. And I know a lot of people don't like this idea about destiny, but I've really kind of realized there's only so much time in this life that you have, and in any given day, there's only so much time. So the question in life is, well, what are you going to focus on? And I find that sometimes life has a way, this feedback loop, a negative feedback loop, though it may be traumatizing, upsetting, and disheartening at the time this negative feedback hits you, it's actually a very positive thing, because it can either make you double up your efforts and realize you got to work harder for something, or it's the reality that, no, you ought to focus your attentions somewhere else, that there's somewhere better that you ought to do, that you have a better aptitude for. And I think about some of our guests have fit that. Jose, the NFL player, bust his knee, and he was able to make an NFL roster and play for several years. But at the end of the day, it's moved him somewhere else. His career has moved him somewhere else, and he's a great motivational speaker and motivates young men and leads young men in the high school ranks.
Yeah.
And of course, has become a great author. I mean, not author, but coach as well. An artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I think it depends on. I think it depends too on how people approach their adversity. The guests that we've had on the podcast have taken what they have been given and work with it. I guess accept it and then work with it and figure out a way to move on and triumph over adversity. I don't think we talked to anybody that just said, "Oh, I quit. Here's my story about how I quit," and never tried anything else. But you're right. Each person that we've talked to had some kind of setback, some kind of adversity, and then they were able to channel that or move in the right direction and benefit from that and eventually prosper even more. So I think it's remarkable to me. It's a lesson in being positive and persevering, even when you have very difficult circumstances, and moving forward and making things work for you. And I think that has been a great message during the podcast for our listeners to understand how these people overcame adversity and were successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of this, Jeff, makes me think of our comic guest, John Ziegler, who
Yeah,
was diagnosed with cancer. And his aha moment along the lines we're talking about was when he looked back and recognized that, wow, if I had not made the changes that I had, hearing the news that I've now got this terminal cancer, which amazingly, miraculously, he has survived, actually.
yeah,
But he would have been terribly angry and upset at his life. And that was one of the things he'd said he was very grateful for, that he had recognized he needed to do something else and did it. Because, like I said, there's only so much time each of us have in this life. And
yeah.
he kind of listened to this kind of negative feedback loop. He was doing these things, he was successful, but he wasn't happy. And that
Hmm.
feedback made him realize, well, why am I not happy? What is the thing I got to do? So he quit everything, became a comedian of all things, and
Yeah.
so then when he's faced with his own mortality, for him, this was a really grateful, eye-opening moment that he had lived a fulfilled life. And
Yeah, and to be able to say that you don't have any regrets is probably the biggest victory, right?
yes,
I mean, just to know that you've overcome something, especially in his case, something so serious. But in other cases, we talk to people that lost jobs and had to get out of a rough situation, from an employment standpoint. But to be able to say that you don't have regrets because you've had this opportunity to try different things, I think is one of those big messages too from the podcast. It's, hey, I overcame adversity. I overcame my fear of trying something else. What do I have to lose? And they went and did that, and ultimately they were more successful or more happier, I guess, than anything.
yeah,
And to be able to say that you don't have regrets, to me, is probably the biggest victory that you could have.
absolutely. And I think sometimes life pushes you towards that. Like we talked about being laid off. Two of the
Yeah.
women we had on the show, Elise Orris and Cathy Weldon, were laid off. Elise decided to embrace her wanderlust and hopped in a trailer in her truck, and
Right.
her and her husband drove across the country. And along that journey, realizes she wants to start a company, right? And
Hmm.
so the journey she's on now and the success her company's having, she would never have had this level of fulfillment if she had not been laid off, right?
Yeah.
Um, and Cathy, she she didn't start a company, but she had to dig deep and double her efforts, and is now in a much happier place, much better company. Never been so happy. And so, yeah, I mean, this adversity, sometimes it looks like a negative, but you got to look forward. What we're talking about here reminds me, I think it's a Middle Eastern proverb or something about a man who has a son, right? And in
Hmm.
this little village, and I think the way it goes that the son is out somewhere and out working their fields, and this horse, of all things, out of nowhere, comes into their property, and they're able to corral it and keep it. And the neighbor for this man goes, "You are the luckiest man ever." To which the man says, "Well, we'll see." Well,
Yeah.
we'll see. A few weeks later, his son is now trying to break this horse and falls off, breaks his leg. So now his neighbor comes to him, "You are the most unluckiest man I have ever seen." To
Yeah.
which the man said, "Well, We'll see. And some time passes, and some marauders or a passing army come in and just forcibly grab the men in the village, the able-bodied young men, right? But they pass on the man's son
Mhm.
because he has a broken leg. And so the point of this whole thing is that, well, you just don't know, right? I think the beauty of life is a tapestry, and all these gnarly and off-colored threads really make it beautiful, but you don't see the beauty until later, I think. And maybe some of this is a bit of a hope on my part, but you just don't know where the outcome's going to be, right, Jeff? Right.
Yeah, I think whenever we go through tough things, we don't see clearly until we're well beyond that trial, that we're going through. And a lot of our guests that we've had on have had, different trials. And, I think a common thread with them was, hey, during the trial, this was terrible. I
Right.
got laid off, or I got cancer, or whatever the trial might have been. And it wasn't until after they had gone through that they could look back and say, wow, I learned something amazing from this, or I grew personally. I was able to overcome that. And I'm so much better as a person than I was before I started. So I think you are right. You can call it the universe or whatever it might be that's pushing us in these various directions to help us become better. And then I think it's up to us to decide how we're going to respond to those particular circumstances. Are we gonna pick up our heels and push forward, or are we going to wallow in misery and not learn anything from the experience? And everybody's experience is slightly different, but I think the key is, what do we do with that experience? What do we do with what we have?
Right.
And go from there. Because some people listening to the podcast may say, well, yeah, it was easy for Elise to travel the U.S. because her husband had health care. He worked for Southwest Airlines and he had health care. I can't do that. I don't have health care. I don't, or I have to, my circumstances aren't the same. But if we look at our own circumstances and try to figure out how we can learn from the experience and push ahead and make adjustments, all of us can achieve greater levels of success, regardless of our circumstance. Everybody's circumstance is going to be a little bit
Right.
different. We can either sit and make excuses why we can't fix it, or we can look for opportunity, look for ways to push ahead. So I think
Absolutely.
that's been a great message.
Exactly, Jeff. To put an analogy on what you were saying, I've often told people that I think, and I use many analogies for life, but one of the ones I've used to kind of dovetail what you were saying is that life is like playing solitaire. Yeah, my circumstances aren't like their others, right? Because if I were to take 25 different decks and line 25 different people up, shuffle them, and play solitaire, not everyone's getting the same
Yeah,
hands, right?
right.
And some people got these great hands, and they're putting the cards down, and others of them won't. But the play is like kind of like what you're saying, is to figure out, well, what hand do I have, and what are the best plays I can make with that hand, and that's
Yeah,
that's
right.
the challenge before each of us, right? And going to what Dr. Bryce Wilson, the psychologist we had on, he talked about that. What happens is that we start building up these negatives, a lot of times negative narratives in our head. I said negatives, didn't I? I meant narratives. But we build up these
Yeah.
negative narratives in our mind. And he talked about how he deals with a lot of people coming out of the penal system, and how they're just like, oh, no one will hire me. I can't do this because I'm a felon. And
Hmm.
to remember what he was saying, Jeffrey, is like, well, it depends how you decide to frame your narrative. You can talk yourself out of anything. That's easy, right? But
Yeah.
if you're a chef at a restaurant and your food's good, are people not going to go to your restaurant because you were a felon? That doesn't make any sense, right? They're going to
Yeah.
go because they like it. And it doesn't have to be food, it's whatever. If you're good at whatever, people are now going to look at your story as not a negative, but an inspirational thing,
Yeah.
right? And go, wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we he had given some examples of different people that had served time in prison. You know, there's actors, for example, that have served time in prison and then turned things around and made a better life for themselves. It's not always easy, but it certainly is possible. And again, that's somebody who has the will and the drive, and doesn't languish in negative thinking. And sometimes that's easier said than done. But he raises some good points there that the power of positive thinking, even if things aren't going very well, but to think, I know things are going to get better. I don't know how they're going to get better, but I know that they're going to get better, and to push forward and so on. Pretty soon, Scott, the world starts to align and help you realize what you are wanting to happen. And so if you're projecting negative, then you invite negative into your life, and anything that's negative that happens, it sort of it confirms that you are. See, I told you, I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was
Right.
going to go wasn't going to go my way, and so on. However, the opposite is true too. If you think positively, and that's not to say you're not going to have any bumps, but if you think positively, then I think the world then starts to align in your favor to help you achieve those goals and move forward. And it may not happen right away, but it eventually it will happen. So and that's a lesson for me, as well as any of our listeners, to think positively, and good things will happen. So I really enjoyed that episode with him.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I've learned too in life, and definitely from our guests, is that when you assert your will into the world adapts to you. And
Yeah,
it's amazing to watch it actually happen. If you're watching it, you just think, oh no, the world will move around you if you decide to go out and go do something, you know?
yeah,
And, like I said, like we've talked about, sometimes there's that negative feedback loop that may guide you in a better direction. But if you don't do anything, then you get acted upon. You can either get up and go push back in life and go see where that takes
yeah.
you, and try to think positively. Don't listen to those negative narratives that we build ourselves up to. And what is that assertiveness? What is that something, Jeff? What I've really valued and learned from our guests is it's virtually almost anything you imagine. I mean,
Hmm.
I think of the couple we had that decided they wanted to go live on a boat, right? That's what they
Yeah,
did. They decided, we're done, we're leaving. Um, and we're downsizing everything, and we're going to move everything into a small, what was it, 37-foot boat or something like that. Tim and Christine were their
yeah,
names. And that
yeah.
is,
Tim Muting.
yeah,
Yeah.
Tim Muting and his wife, Christine. Exactly. And so, I mean, wow, that's a choice to make. One of our other guests, he gets let go because for various reasons, too expensive, too old, whatever. He could have gone back, taken a different role, but he decided, nah, I'm going to go build some tiny homes and just Verbo those or Airbnb those and just
Yeah,
have some fun
yeah.
doing that. Or, I mean, there are so many different decisions that can be made. There's not like a single thing. I guess if I were to boil everything down that we learned and what we've been talking about, Jeff, is that there are some common similarities. The one is the positive attitude that we've talked about, and to not let
Hmm.
yourself fall victim to your negative narratives you tell about yourself. And that's so
Yeah,
important because all of us have objectively true negative traits. I mean, that's just true, right? But
yeah,
to focus, so you know what I'm saying? I say that because sometimes like, oh, but I'm whatever, fill in the blank. Yeah, well,
Hmm.
that welcome to the planet. Welcome to the humanity. All of us have that fill in the blank. But yet
Yeah.
some people are successful despite that. And the reason is they don't fall victim to that. It's like, so what? I've got some warts, I got some bruises, I got some liabilities, whatever. I'm just going to go forward and I'm just going to go try to do the best I have, like playing solitaire. It's like I'm going to play the best cards I have with the hand I have and go.
Hmm.
And then the other part of that
Yeah.
is just not the positive attitude, but the willingness to work. The common thing all these people talked about, right, Jeff, is they really had to work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. In fact, some of them, well, maybe all of them worked harder than they did before at their previous job, but they were happier doing it, and so they didn't mind that extra work.
right,
Uh, our psychologist who joined us, he talked about how he didn't really have a lot of steady income for, gosh, was it the first year or
yeah,
two or
yeah,
something? And he just kept plugging along and eventually started to establish his clientele and build that up. He had some base, I think, from work he was doing at a previous employer that he had, but going out on his own presented a whole new set of challenges. But he indicated on that podcast that he was working more hours
that's
now
right.
than he did then, but he didn't mind it because he was working for himself and doing what he wanted to do. And I think he said he was doing it under his conditions. It was his way of doing things, and he didn't have anybody telling him what time to
Right.
come in and what time to leave and all of that. And so that for him was a huge payback. That was a huge benefit for him to go out on his own,
Yeah,
to actually be in charge of his life and not be have to be told every day what time to be somewhere and what to do. So for him, that was something that was very important to him in making that uh, transformation in his life, in his career.
exactly. I also think about Danielle, our Jamaican restaurateur. She
Yeah.
probably should have called that episode, now that I think about it, the corporate anti pattern, because her the way she went about things was definitely different, right? Because she takes, I think, what she said, 3 or 4 months a year off. Now this off time,
Hmm.
she's actually not physically working, but she's reassessing and planning out what she's going to do for the next um, 9 to 8 months or 8 to 9 months.
Yeah.
Well, so she is still doing something, and that's important to realize too, because people go, "Oh, I'd love to do that," but she was very
Yeah.
smart and measured with what she did, because she created something that people like, and she created a scarcity with it. So
Hmm.
people pay a premium, so that allows her to have that reset time to plan out what's going to happen the next one, the next season. So she's not running this rat race, right? And that's definitely not the corporate world. The corporate world is, oh, if you
Yeah.
struck gold, then you just keep on digging and get more and more gold. And she was like,
Yeah.
well, if
Yeah.
I have some gold, I'll just be happy with the gold I'm getting, right?
Yeah, that's a good point because even when I first heard her story, I was thinking, wow, you need to expand and have multiple locations and really build up your business and hire more people and so on. And as you said, she's very structured in, okay, I'm going to make this scarce in terms of the days of the week that we're open, the number of hours per day that we're open, but it also achieves her goal of having time off and having a balance. I think of all the people that we interviewed, she struck me as having the most balance in life, and yet she was able to, like you said, she had enough gold for her, she had
Yes,
enough income for her, and yet she was able to have the downtime she needed and
right.
do something that was very fulfilling for her. So again, she's able to call the shots. She's able to work the hours that she wants to work. She's able to manage her life the way that she wants to do it, and yet achieve a level of financial success that works for her.
Right.
And she's not going to franchise it. She's probably not going to make millions of dollars every year, but she's very content and very happy at the pace she's going. And so
Right.
there's a lot to be said for that. There's, it's again, finding that contentment that works for you, and what works for you may not work for somebody else. Somebody else might find contentment in working a lot more hours than they did with their regular job, but they're happier because they're doing it under their own circumstances. They're able to call the shots and make the choices and so on. And then you have other people that, like Danielle, that are have a more measured balance, and that
Right.
works for her. So in all the cases when we've interviewed people, I think they have found a level of happiness that works for them, whatever
Right.
that circumstance might be.
Well, they found what they valued, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Tim and Christine made a drastic lifestyle choice, right?
Hmm.
Similar to Danielle, right? She made a certain decision and was focused on what she valued, and Tim and
Yeah.
Christine, uh, sailing the Caribbean, the Eastern Seaboard as a lifestyle, not just as a vacation, was
Yeah.
that for them. They truly enjoy, as they put it, camping on the ocean. That's basically what it is, and they are very happy, right? And balance.
And
Yeah, good.
they also did work. I mean, they worked, as they said. I think Tim plays in a band, and he does gigs like that when they're in various locations.
Yeah,
I think he also they also did something else. Was it? I can't remember.
he
Waiting,
drives boats for people, so
drive boats. That was
he'll
it.
drive other
Yeah.
people's boats, well, rich people's boats, from, let's say, somewhere up in the Northeast, and get them down to the Caribbean. Right? He discovered that
Yeah.
people want to pay other people to take their boats to locations. He was like, really? That's a thing. So
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
he's capable, does it. He does it, right, for some extra
Yeah.
operating cash here and there, right?
Yeah, and I think for them, just like Danielle, they, you know, obviously you have to have some income. You have to be able to figure that out. To to some degree, you have to have an income, but they are able to make that work for them. I think because, as you said, they gave away or sold most of the things that they had, and they realized that having all of this extra stuff does not necessarily constitute happiness, and so they
Right.
they were able to make that shift downward. At least in terms of what they owned and had. Um, Somebody told me a long time ago. They said that it was a little saying. They said your level of stress is commensurate with the number of motors that you own. Now you think about that for a second, and you think about how many motors you own, and every one of those causes you some level of stress at some point in your life, right? So you have obviously your cars have motors. When they go out, it's stressful. You got to get them fixed. Your refrigerator has a motor. When
Right.
that goes out, that is stress. Your garage door opener has a motor. So anyway, the point of that little saying is the more motors you own, the higher your stress is.
Hmm.
And so if you have four cars and you have, I don't know, a cabin in the woods, and you have a boat, and you have jet skis, and you have, on and on and on, all of that stuff has to be maintained and serviced and so on. So I think with Tim and Christine, they've been able to back that off and
Right.
reduce, uh, not entirely eliminate, but reduce the number of motors that they have in their
Well, they
life.
assume a different stress too, right? Because I would say the cynic part goes,
Yeah.
oh, well, I would love to have multiple cars, and I was thinking life would be easier.
Yeah.
But it's not the day to day stress, but it's the stress you bear as a burden to have the opportunity to have acquired all those things. Those things don't come for free. right? Those
Yeah.
multiple motors, to use your analogy, is like, no,
Yeah.
well, you have to be willing to do the things and sacrifice the things that that individual did to get all of those, right?
Yeah. And there's a
Once you've
price to be
acquired them,
paid.
right? I often tell people all the time, Jeff, there is no such thing in life. It's one of my great frustrations is that there's no such thing in life as solutions. There are only trade-offs. Truly, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. What are you willing to trade for this?
Hmm.
Exchange this for that. That's 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 what it is. You know, if
Yeah.
you don't want to have any stress in your life, well, then you'll probably be working an hourly job that does X, Y, and Z, but you've really traded one form of stress for another. In fact, I'll tell you, I worked a
Yeah.
lot with the homeless when I was younger, and I worked to try to get them jobs and so forth. And one of the things I recognized at that time was that just what I'm saying, people, it determines what kind of stress they want to assume.
Hmm.
The people I talked to, the homeless people I found, is that by and large they didn't want a job. They were homeless by choice because they didn't want to deal with the taxes. They don't want to have to pay their bills, um, manage their budget. I mean, this when I talked to them, I was so eye opening. I was like, wait, that was stressful to them, a stress they couldn't
Yeah.
stand. But they
Yeah.
traded that for a stress of being on the street, where well, there's an increased chance of violence and an increased chance. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they
And the
traded one
weather
form of
conditions.
stress, which they preferred, over another form of stress. And bringing that back
Yeah.
to our guests chose something that they valued and assumed the lifestyle or choices with the commensurate burden that
Yeah.
it bears.
Yeah.
That works
That's
for
a
them.
very good point. It's a very good point. I mean, you watch those reality shows, people living in Alaska, out in the wilderness or
Right.
whatever, and you think, hey, this is great. I don't have to be around lots of people and so on. And then you watch the show and it's like, oh my gosh, they've got to prepare for food and they've got to cut firewood and they've got to, winter is coming and winter is long and cold and difficult. And so we have to shoot, animals and, stock up and I'm just like, that's a ton of work.
Yeah.
I mean, that you're right. You're trading off one solution for another, or I mean, every solution has its side effects or its impact, and
Yeah. There's just
so
trade offs
you
in
can't.
life.
Yeah, you can't really escape challenges. You just trade them for for a different challenge. That's a very good point.
That's it. You know, I've
Yeah.
seen some ads coming out from Showtime for a documentary about John McEnroe, the famous and
Hmm.
elite tennis player, right? And I
Yeah.
don't know. We'll see what how the documentary goes. Uh, I'm interested because of our podcast we've done. I might buy the subscription for a couple months or the trial just to watch McEnroe. But on
Yeah.
the teaser that they had, Jeff, McEnroe's talking about how he was the best tennis player in the world, which he was,
Hmm.
and he was the best this and this and best top of whatever. And he mentioned that he's like, why am I not happy? That's what the teaser shows. He goes, I spent all this time trying to be the best when I could have been a better father. And again, we'll see what the documentary actually unfolds. The teasers, I'm sure, a condensed version of this. But along the lines of what
Yeah.
we're talking about is like his that little bit, if it turns out to be accurate for what the documentary is about, has been so true of so many athletes who've reached the top.
Hmm.
And they're there and they're like, huh, I guess I expected a little more fulfillment, right? And
Yeah.
they were looking for something. And I think our guests that we had, what I'm just loved about it was that they found this fulfillment, right? You don't have to be a billionaire to be happy, or even a millionaire to be happy. You
Yeah.
mentioned those folks in Alaska; they're happy. Tim and Christine are happy. You know,
Hmm.
John Ziegler, the comedian, is happy. Danielle is
Yeah.
happy. All of them are happy. A lot of them have been laid off or whatever. Life has kind of pushed them to the direction where they're at now,
Uh-huh.
but they've kind of found their stride or making the best plays with the hands that they had, and they have found fulfillment and happiness, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it stood out so clearly to me as we went through these podcasts, a very common thread that each of them was given some trial or adversity, and then each of them chose to have a positive attitude and move forward and make the best of the situation. So for me, it's been a great lesson for me even to see how they've dealt with adversity and move forward and have been what I would call victorious
Right.
in achieving success,
And there's more
and
life.
sometimes under very difficult circumstances.
Yes. And there's more life. We're talking about these folks like in the past tense, like what historical figure, but they're all
Yeah,
like in the middle of this thing, right? There's still a
yeah,
lot more life to be going. And, coming back to your point with your balance statement, I remember talking to I think it was a mom years ago or something. I was just wondering where the balance was. I'm like, well,
hmm,
when you're a new mom, a new parent, oh no, there's no balance. That baby requires everything, and you don't sleep, and they cry at night, and then when they
yeah,
start walking, oh my goodness, those first 2 years are like wow.
yeah,
But this idea of balance sometimes is a longer play. There are moments
hmm,
that you will absolutely be working your tail off to do whatever, raise your kids, start up a company, or whatever it is you're doing.
hmm,
And then there are other times that'll be downtime to offset that, right? Sometimes I think balance
yeah,
can be achieved long term. But I also believe, though, you should always have that listening ear to the world, to see if it's nudging you
hmm,
somewhere else. Be open minded to go, oh, I think I need to go do this other thing,
yeah,
whatever that other thing is. And you and I have talked about this, Jeff, about maybe it's just asking for a raise at work. Maybe it's trying to switch to another department, get away from
yeah,
a toxic boss, or I don't know, something. Or hey, maybe even going to counseling, because maybe the problems in your life are you, and it'd be helpful to have an objective person help you figure out what it is you're doing, what it is about yourself that you know gets you attracted to the
yeah,
wrong kind of people, or whatever it is, right?
right,
But to figure it out, the thing I would say though, so the common things we've talked about is this work willingness to work, right? This
hmm,
positive attitude. The thing that I would bring up, maybe we could end on this in our season finale, that really impressed me was from our final guest, Jack Barsky. He said the thing that ultimately guided him to resign from the KGB, right, was love. And love has been the big driving force of his life ever since. And he was so focused, I think, on doing this mission and doing the things he had kind of allowed himself to become a little disassociated, I think, with that aspect of humanity. And when it presented himself, he's come to realize that's the most valuable and important thing in life, period. It doesn't
hmm,
matter what your political beliefs are, your religious beliefs. He's like, love is it. Love is the thing,
hmm,
the most important thing in this life. And
yeah, yeah. That's absolutely true. I think, yeah, for him that was very. I mean, that was a big deal. That was, like you said, that was the turning point in his life. I think too. You were talking about athletes, and they reach the pinnacle of success, and then they're at the top of the mountain, and they're like, "This is it," you know.
right.
Um, because I think those things, they've achieved financial success, but at what cost? At what human cost along the way? A cost to the family, to relationships, things like that. And so, and then you realize that there are some things that are more important than just, dollars in the checking account. And I think that's been an important factor for a number of our guests as they have shared their stories with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things I've learned from this and, talking with Jack and everything is that, yeah, meaning in life is found by loving people, serving people who you love. And
Hmm.
also, ironically enough, it's one of great life's ironies is in suffering too. Finding
Yeah.
meaning in this vibrant color in life does come from suffering and from love. Or, and
Yeah.
if you don't like the word suffering, because sometimes, well, suffering in life is unavoidable. It's just going to happen. But also
Yeah.
sacrificing is another thing too. Um,
Yeah.
that's where you really find meaning. But if a lot of these athletes or these top business people, whatever, oh, they sacrifice all of relationships, all this stuff, and that's why I think they find they're lonely at the top because they also sacrificed love,
Yeah.
right? And then that's what
No,
they're
absolutely.
missing, right?
Hmm.
And I don't think you have to sacrifice that. Actually, I think you can sacrifice a lot of things and still have love as a companion as you go through life and as you go through things. In fact, I would say it's more fulfilling that way. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Definitely agree.
if you're going to get that out of your life, then yeah, you're going to find yourself, I think, pretty lonely when you reach that pinnacle and wonder what happened. Right? I was so
Yeah.
busy.
Everything else is, all those successes are kind of hollow if you don't have those relationships in your life as well.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times individuals that are highly successful like that, if they've lost those relationships, they'll either try to reestablish the relationships or build new relationships because they recognize that something's missing, that they've lost.
And maybe that's why what I've said, suffering is kind of an irony because it helps you find meaning. Maybe that's why it does that. Because then it
Yeah.
refocuses you on like, well, wow, what is really important in this life? Because this life actually is quite temporary and
Hmm.
relatively fragile. Things can just happen, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you really start looking at those more important, more meaningful things that
Yeah.
transcend life, right? And I think love is it.
I
But
totally agree.
all
Well,
right,
so looking forward, what you want to talk a little bit about moving ahead with the podcast?
yeah, I mean we'll see where this journey takes us, right, Jeff? We do have some folks lined up that we're working out, so we are going to be, I guess, sorting that out. We'll be looking at getting and trying to book some other guests and making whatever changes we need to, tweaking things. Season one is always about learning and figuring
Yeah.
things out. And I think we've learned a lot of things. I hope everyone who's listening or watching this has enjoyed learning with us as we've done this, and not just as from us, but more importantly from our guests. And I actually think some of this advice and thoughts that we've gotten from our guest Jeff have been, some people pay money to learn some of these things at business schools and so forth,
Yeah.
and they were just dispensing here free. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we'll see where this journey takes us, Jeff. Right? We've got some folks lined up tentatively; they're penciled in, and
Yes.
yeah, we'll see what season two
Well,
brings.
yeah. And like you said, it's been a learning experience. It's been a lot of fun. And we have met some incredible people in this first season of the podcast. And so I look forward to meeting a lot of other very interesting people and having them share their thoughts and ideas with us that are inspirational to all of us.
Exactly. Okay, well, I guess that's about it that's a wrap. We'll call season one a wrap. We'll move on to scheduling and then unpackaging season two, and
All right.
we'll see y'all, I guess, in theory, in the late fall when we start unloading next season's episodes.
All right. Thank you, Scott. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, and in the meantime, enjoy some football and some pumpkin spice and all those wonderful things that are coming before us with the fall, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. We just have to get through the Texas heat here and then we'll, we'll be on our way.
Yeah, same here in Hotlanta. It's I suppose the calendar says fall's coming, but I don't know when.
Yeah. Yeah, the calendar says that here too, but the temperature still hasn't cooperated.
Exactly. All right, my friend.
All right.
Have a good one. and we'll see you next season.
All right. You too. Thank you, Scott. We'll
Okay.
see you.
Bye. Thank you for joining us today. Listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at QuitCrappyJob. Find us on YouTube at QuitYourCrappyJob. Contact us at quityourcrappyjob@gmail.com. Music is provided by Kelton Levitt. He can be reached at kelton.levitt@gmail.com.